that Nicole went on with student teachers and is sharing with us today. So Nicole, thank you so much for this work, and big thanks to your committee, your chair, Dr. Elizabeth Bellows, Dr. Beth Buchholz, Dr. Jen McGee. What a terrific committee. And I know they've gone on a big journey with you. So my thanks to them and to you for sticking with this. You've been remarkably creative, persistent, resilient, and thoughtful in putting this together. I think, using the photo voice methodology was a big move, and it gave us tremendous insight into the identity, the journey of teachers in the making. So we're just excited to find out and what you found out, and that you're sharing that with us. So what we can do now is actually we can do some introductions of everybody here to honor the cohort, Nicole's family, and the committee and friends. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Elizabeth Bellows. She'll be chairing the defense. All right, Nicole, you want to introduce yourself and some of your family here?
Oh yeah, sure. I put it on speaker view because there's that squirrel inside me. So yes, I'm Nicole Welz, and I have so many people that are showing up for me today. My parents and my boyfriend Aaron and my daughter Laura Lane, they're all waving right now. They're in the living room. I've got my Aunt Sue from New Jersey, Carol, my Aunt Janie, of course my committee members. You all are, Daciel was right, I could not have done this without you. Some people that I don't know. Oh, my principal, Andy Lester Niles, he is here. I couldn't have done, oh, he's wearing that App State mask. Mom, you see that? He's also an App State grad, and for 2 years, he actually gave me permission to go to class and leave, for a half day every Wednesday to make my classes. So I did a little bit of a dedication to him. I see Carrie Hodges and my cousin Augie, who's normally sleeping right now. I think my Aunt Joyce is here. And yeah, I hope that I didn't miss anybody, but man, my cousin August, he usually sleeps until like 1 p.m. So I am so pumped he's here. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry. I was just going down the line.
Hey, Nick, I see Aunt Karen. I see Emmy.
Oh, Emmy's on.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay, my Aunt Joyce, I think. Yeah, I don't see those on my screen, but I'm trying not to mess with anything. So yes, thank you for all being here. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. And I know there are several other new doctoral students in the room, so thank you all for joining us. I'll turn it over to Elizabeth, and then I'll just invite everyone to mute other than Nicole and Elizabeth, so that we can really focus on her presentation in a moment.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Bellows, and I'm an associate professor in the Curriculum and Instruction Department in the College of Education. And Nicole is becoming my first academic daughter today. So we have little family, academic families. That's how I was raised in academia. And so I am honored and privileged to host my first doctoral dissertation with my first doctoral student. So this is an exciting day for me too, Nicole. I share in your excitement, and I'm really excited that you have a lot of your family here. I think that's really cool. And so we've been talking a little bit about trying to find some positive things in the midst of the way the world is right now. And I think this is one of those things. You can have people here who wouldn't normally be able to make the trip to Boone and be in the doctoral suite or in that the dean's conference room for one of these dissertation defenses. And so I'm really happy that they could show up today. So our committee members, I would like Dr. McGee and Dr. Buchholz to introduce themselves, if that's okay. And then I'm going to give a little introduction to Nicole's study before she presents her work to us today. Yeah, Jen, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Jennifer McGee. I'm an associate professor in curriculum and instruction. I teach research and evaluation, and I'm in Dr. Bellows' department.
I'm Beth Buchholz. I'm an assistant professor in reading education and special education.
So this was our team. And Nicole came to me actually right before I was going to start teaching in the doctoral program, but somebody, a mutual colleague in the department, hooked us up together because I'm a social studies educator and I work with pre-service teachers. And I try to teach in critical ways. And Nicole was interested in starting an internship to co-teach my social studies methods class. And so that's how we met. And I was really impressed with the way she just sort of took over when I gave her free rein to do whatever she wanted to do with the pre-service teachers. And just like most of us here, what strikes us about Nicole's study is the use of narrative photo voice. And so she wanted to test that out in my class. And I would say that it really gave us some insight into identity construction and what was happening in terms of how a teacher becomes a teacher through their end of their senior year and sort of as they get pushed off into that student teaching space. And so Nicole became really interested in what that looks like while we're sort of figuring out who we are as teachers, as educators, what our teaching style is going to be, who we're going to cling to, and who's going to help us through these spaces of becoming a professional. So I'm really excited that Nicole's work is ready to share with everyone today. It's been a long time coming, and I will say I have never seen someone improve so quickly on a project with taking critique like a champ. And so it's ready, and I'm excited that you're birthing it today, Nicole. So
That's what it feels like.
yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. So
No epidural.
without further ado, Nicole, take it away. Tell us about your study.
All right, thank you so much.
And just to say, Nicole, too, that folks are gonna, I invite folks to jot down questions. And I know Nicole, if there's a clarifying question as she presents, she'd be fine, I think, to field those if someone wants to drop something in the chat. Otherwise, we're gonna have time for discussion at the end. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Are you going to monitor that chat, obviously?
Yeah,
Because I
yep,
can't.
I'm on it.
Okay, great, thank you, awesome. Okay, so I'm Nicole Welz. Like I said previously, I have been a teacher in North Carolina for 16 years in the classroom. I've taught in predominantly Title I schools, but for the past 5 years, I've been an instructional facilitator at a school in Winston, and that's pre-K through 8th grade. So that's just a little bit about myself right now before I really tell you about myself. So my title here is Deconstructing Identity in the Liminal Space, Student Narratives Using Photo Voice. So I focused on student teachers. Before I do begin with the presentation, I want to provide you a roadmap and define some terms that you will need to completely understand my study. So the first word is liminal space or liminality, which I use in my study. It means the threshold or the middle of transitions, the quality of disorientation that occurs in the middle state of a rite of passage. In this particular instance, the participants were moving from student teacher to professional. And also for this study, I have used the lens of a feminist post-structuralist, specifically using the work of Foucault, and I'll talk about that later. So look at my slides. On the top right of the screen, there is an image of what is called a panopticon. This structure was built in 1791 as a prison system, and the guard tower is located in the middle, which faces in all directions, and the prisoners on the outside never know if the guard is watching or not. So it was designed as a prisoner self-regulation system. I used Foucault's theory of the panopticon in education, representing educators being under constant surveillance, self-regulation, and identity construction by positions of power. The participants in this research that you will meet a little later used a mixture of narrative inquiry and photo voice in order to document their experiences. Now, on the bottom left-hand side, there is an image of a Polaroid camera. The participants use Polaroid cameras because the photographs cannot be edited, no filters on those. And then lastly, I will use the word or acronym EdTPA a lot, and that stands for the Teacher Performance Assessment. The students in this study were required to submit EdTPA, which is a rigorous assessment that they had to pass for graduation and teacher licensure. And this particular assessment was submitted to an outside company called Pearson, and then was graded by educators outside the university's organization. So now that I've given you a roadmap of terms, we can go on our journey. So meet the researcher, that's me. So this is me on my first day of kindergarten, the first day that I entered mass education. There's my cute little lunchbox. I'm pretty sure it had Care Bears on it. I had no idea at this moment that I would be grouped, labeled, dehumanized, humanized, and unknowingly being part of a constructed curriculum. My parents had just gotten divorced, and I was being shifted around from house to house. I had trouble in school. I couldn't read or seem to do anything correct. I was put in the Blackbird group in 2nd grade. Yes, I remember this. This is the group where everyone in the class knew was for the stupid kids. In school, I was tracked. I couldn't take certain classes. I couldn't read certain books. I remember I wanted to read the Scarlet Letter so bad, but it was too hard for me. But there was really nothing wrong with me. In high school, though, the guidance counselor said I probably shouldn't go to college, that it really wasn't for me. I didn't know as a young child that anything was actually happening to me until I found my school file in the attic when I was probably 19 years old. My parents were moving to a new house. And when I looked into this file, I saw all of these disturbing things written about me and what I was capable and not capable of. It was almost like that scene in Elf where Buddy realizes that he's a human. That was me. I decided that school was for me, and I became a teacher. I felt like I could make a difference. But what I didn't know was that my identity from my earlier years was constructed by many different people and positions of power. As I went through the first couple of years of teaching, I began to notice a few things. This is pretty much my problem statement in my dissertation. 1, I was not prepared to teach despite training and student teaching. I literally had to wing it all of the time. 2, I had college professors, principals, assistant principals, and parents of my students telling me many different things. In my study, I refer to these as opposing binaries, so good teacher versus bad teacher. And 3rd, really great teachers that I knew were quitting the teaching profession after only a few years, probably 3 or 4 years, to do basically anything else. And also, I noticed I switched masks constantly. I was afraid of people in positions of power who watched my every move in the classroom, marked up my lesson plans, and wanted me to teach something different than what I had planned. I began to ask myself, why did this happen to me? Does this happen to other people? And what are their stories? How can the liminal space be documented? And at the time, I didn't know the term liminal space, but I was in between all of these positions. And these were my research questions. What happens to student teachers in the liminal space? And how can student teachers construct/deconstruct their identities using narrative photo voice? So internship equals opportunity. So this was a little bit about what Dr. Bellows spoke of when I was doing my internship with her, her social studies methods course. During this time, I was getting to know the 23 students in the class that we had right before their student teaching semester. I presented my study when it was in its little infant stage to the class, and 6 of the students out of the 23 approached me with interest. I was able to do a pilot study with Photo Voice so they could see what the student teaching study would look like. 4 out of the 6 original committed to the dissertation study. So over the past year, the participants and I formed an extremely close relationship and continue to talk at least once a week. So you may wonder and ask yourself why I chose student teachers. And I felt, well, they are in the liminal space between their previous ways of thinking and their identity deconstruction. And for me personally, this time was the most vulnerable and critical time in my life. And at the end of this study, I had asked the participants to share a word to describe how they viewed themselves during the identity work within the study. So as you meet them, I'm going to use their pseudonym that I used in the dissertation to protect their identity, but then also the word that they gave themselves. Now, it is great to point out right here that the student teachers did not want their identities hidden. As a matter of fact, they did want to take what I'll talk about later to the College of Ed and to stakeholders. But for my comfort, I gave them pseudonyms for the dissertation. So Mary the questioner, let's meet Mary. So when I first met Mary, she consistently questioned her choice to be a teacher. Constantly, even before student teaching and throughout the study. Do I want to do this? Do I want to do this? She always felt like she did everything her parents wanted and called herself a people pleaser many times. Because of her family history and income problems and job losses, her family urged her to become a teacher for money stability. Her mother also decided to be a teacher, and they were in the same teacher prep program together. Mary struggled deeply with identity work and was always questioning who she was. She got her name spot on. Mary had gotten married 1 month before student teaching. And then during student teaching, her husband was in the process of trying to get a pastoral position. She also had to be interviewed for this position to make sure she was a godly wife. Religion is a huge part of Mary's identity. This is one of the photographs that Mary took of her student teaching classroom. She said she wasn't sure if the classroom was for her. However, she did end up getting a part-time teaching position at a school nearby, and she tutors at her church. She is also, I found out a couple weeks ago that she's expecting her first baby in December. Meet Maggie, the optimist. When I first met Maggie, she came up to me and started asking me so many questions about teaching. I knew right away that she was passionate about being a teacher. She said it runs in her blood. Maggie was the first participant to ask me about being part of the study. This is a picture of her student teaching classroom that she called her dream place, describing it as her home away from home. Maggie's biggest struggle was the constant thought of not being able to be a teacher. It was a deep fear of hers during identity work. After all the worrying, Maggie did get a permanent kindergarten teaching position and had her baby girl in March. Meet Jennifer, the authentist. Jennifer experienced many up and downs during student teaching. She originally started school to be a nurse like her mother, but deep down inside, she wanted to be a teacher because she watched her younger sister struggle in school with a learning disability. Opposite of Mary, her parents steered her away from teaching. But after a year in nursing school, she dropped out and enrolled in the College of Education. Her passion for her sister's school experience funneled down into her passion for teaching in general. Jennifer's longtime boyfriend proposed to her after she completed her student teaching. She makes me laugh because she said, I know he's going to propose to me during student teaching, and I just keep telling him not to because I'm too stressed. I could just hear her voice. Jennifer now teaches 6th grade social studies, and then she got married in September. And then lastly, meet Pam, the prepared piler. Pam is the oldest member of the cohort by several years. She had delved into many other careers before accepting that her calling was to be a teacher. One of her most memorable quotes to me was, "I fought the urge to be a teacher because every Southern white blonde girl is a teacher." Pam fluctuated through multiple liminal spaces because of her spunky straight shooter attitude. She felt like she had to be someone else for so many different people all of the time. Pam's boyfriend, Tom, also had a significant impact on her identity. And her student teaching, during her student teaching, a lot of decisions had to be made that involved him. Unfortunately, Pam and Tom broke up a week before her graduation, but Pam is still currently looking for a teaching position. And this is a picture of one of her piles. So she took a lot of photographs of her piles. So we're going to move to the literature review. So my study, my story, like I told you in the beginning, it led me to ask important questions, look at all the problems that were going on right, in front of me, around me, which in turn led me to my participants. I had no idea that I would have been able to find people that were passionate about my study. So I turned to the literature to see what work had already been done on deconstruction of student teaching identity in the liminal space. And here's what I found. So the gaps in the literature on student teacher identity was that everything that I had read, it just had a sole reliance on positive outcomes. Everything was great. Everything was awesome. We journaled. I was upset, but I journaled, and now everything's great. So there were a lot of studies that reported just everything was great all of the time. Secondly, there was nothing in the literature on identity that talked about power negotiations between all of the positions of power that teachers, despite even student teachers, had to deal with. So that was a gap that I wanted to close. And then lastly, there wasn't anything that investigated competing discourses within the liminal space of student teaching. So that's where a lot of my work hit heavy on. So my theory and my identity frameworks. So we'll move into that. So it started in the beginning. So I recognized through my whole study that I have subjectivities. I start with my narrative in my actual paper. And the theoretical framework that I use is feminist post-structuralism, specifically using the work of Foucault, Britzman, and Lather, and then Turner's liminal space. And then the identity frameworks that I used were G and Goffman. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that. So feminist post-structuralism helped me to chip away at my research questions. The perspective highlights how rules and regulations govern us and how teacher identity ultimately are constructed by persons of power, such as experts, college professors, principals. This theory also helped me meet the goals of the research by deconstructing identity, keeping things in process, to disrupt, to keep the system at play, and then also to set up procedures to break up the realities that were created for all of us. And the identity frameworks that I used in conjunction with that was G. So his identity framework was used to understand how identity is used in order to pull apart and examine its many, many layers. Goffman's identity theory, which is the one that I think that I have used the most, viewed identity as a theatrical performance where people wear multiple masks to conceal or underplay their activities. They also usually wear masks that are incompatible with the ideal version of the person's actual true self. And in this study in particular, Goffman's theory played out for the participants because they wore many masks and they hid their true feelings all of the time, except when they were engaged in narrative photo voice. So my methodology, I think that's why some of you are here. So the methodology that I used was narrative inquiry and photo voice. So it's a hybrid of the two. There is only one other study that I have found in all of the research that used this. So I'm not sure if anybody's doing it now, but there wasn't much, just one. So the use of narrative inquiry in conjunction with photo voice allowed the participants to tell their stories through the three-dimensional space of the past, present, and future. So when I wrote their stories in my dissertation, I do talk about their past, present, and future, just how I introduced them to you all. Photo voice enabled the participants to photograph their identity, construction, and deconstruction in the liminal space. And then I want to point out that photo voice is a type of participatory action research that normally gives marginalized people a voice. In this particular study, the student teachers wanted to reach many stakeholders and make policy changes in the College of Education. That was very important to them. The participants did have to be trained in photo voice protocols, such as how to take pictures if they're including their students. So they were trained. It is an 8-step process, but this presentation isn't long enough to train all of you. I know you want to. They were trained twice because they were in Dr. Bellows' class, so we did that pilot study. So they were very familiar with this methodology. So the methods that I used, and in this picture, it shows actual samples of their photo voice and narrative journals where they had pictures and then they would write about it. So I used focus group interviews, one-on-one interviews, journaling, and photograph narration. So these are the 4 things that we did for 6 months. So the first thing is during the one-on-one interviews, I started off with these questions every time I would see the teacher. So this was specifically for one-on-one. So who are you as a student teacher? I would ask them every time. And then what experiences have shaped your identity in student teaching? And then they were tasked to take at least 4 pictures of who they were, and then choose one picture to narrate in their journal. So in the slide before, I'll go back, that's what it would look like. So even though they had taken so many pictures, they would only choose one to narrate. So this is what I used during the focus group interviews. So this is called the showed method. So during the focus group interviews where we were all together, the participants and I would go through the showed method. So the S is, what do you see here? And this was with their photos that they would share. The H is, what is really happening here? The O is, how does this relate to our lives? So collectively, we were in on this, this protocol together. And then why does this condition exist and what can we do about it? So each student teacher would go one at a time. We conducted these via Zoom. They would show their picture to the group, read the narration or their journal entry, and as a group, we would unpack the photographs. It was during these photo focus group interviews when the participants would show their most frustration with student teaching, because they were all together and they just had a lot to say to each other. It was also mentioned several times that they were not supported. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I want to bring it up here. During the October focus group interview, every student teacher had shared a picture of their EdCPA manual. And I had mentioned in the beginning that EdCPA was that assessment they had to take. It was interesting to see that they essentially took the same photograph and they brought it to the focus group interview. That was very shocking for me as the researcher. It really was. So this is an example of my interview timeline. It was something that I made to keep track of our one-on-ones, the location, was it a phone call? Basically for every one-on-one, I went to the school site. So this was a timeline that I made just to make sure that, my data was organized. So that's a little sample of that. And so here's an example. Ooh, okay. So here's some examples of their narrative photo voice. And so I have each participant's one of their photographs, and then it's just a little sample about what their journal entry would say. So for example, Mary. So she took a picture of her church, and this is what she wrote, little excerpt. This is the church that hired Ethan. He went through so many obstacles to get this job. The entire process of interviews took almost 6 weeks. It also involved both of us. I had to be a good fit for the church. This is more than a job, it is our life. Ministry is a calling, otherwise it won't work. It takes all of you to be in it, and it is hard. So remember, in this particular participant's life, she was really questioning whether or not she wanted to be a teacher. So she had a lot going on, and then she also had her new husband's job that she was also absorbing, and it was almost taking on her identity a little bit. And then the next picture is Maggie. She was the optimist. She wrote, I took this picture of my student teaching badge. By now I am starting to show, she's pregnant, and my students all know I am so excited. The students care so much. They ask me daily how the baby is and how I am feeling. They also gave me a little stuffed animal to hang on my name tag for the baby. So that was one of her favorite photos. And then we have Jennifer. So you'll see one of these pictures again, but Jennifer took a picture of her EdTPA manual, and she writes, who knew an assignment could be so stressful? I've experienced anxiety over this assignment. I've shed many tears, and I often have a constant worry inside of me because it determines if I graduate or not. My heart hurts for future student teachers who will have to do EdTPA. She writes, I pray every day that I'm following the rubrics and completing it as I should. And then lastly, Pam, she took a picture of a clock. She says, I feel like I never have enough time. I took a picture of my clock to represent my struggle with time management and literally living minute to minute. So that was just a sample of their narrative photo voice entries. So moving on to the data analysis. So this is important based on the interviews that I just shared with you. So after each meeting, I feel like I was pretty organized. I was working full time, but I tried to really stick with my my organization blessing that I have. I did transcribe the interviews after every meeting right away. I did not wait because it was fresh. So I transcribed the interviews myself. I read the transcripts multiple times. And then even though in the interviews I began hearing things over and over, I did begin noticing trends within their dialogue and reoccurring topics throughout the one-on-one and focus group interviews. I'm old school. I printed all of the transcripts, lots of pages, and I actually hand coded the transcripts. And I showed you on this slide the symbols that I used as I was going through all of the transcripts. And I had humanization, identity, EdTPA or the panopticon, future, jobs, liminal space, and then prep or lack of prep. These were the 6 most dominant themes that I found that had a direct impact on their identity work. We did discuss other things, but these were the most prominent. The participants, and this is also very important, they had access to everything that I wrote all of the time. They read the transcriptions if they wanted to, and if I felt like in their stories I wasn't getting something right, I would call them, and then they had a direct hand in this process. So it really isn't my research, it was theirs. So after we did I did the data analysis, and we, the teachers, they did all graduate, which is wonderful. Staying true to the photo voice methodology, they do have at the end a final photo voice focus group. It was held 2 months after the student teaching experience. So they had time to take a break from it and then come back and reflect. So we all met on a Saturday in February at a community college where we had met a year prior. This was probably 2 weeks before the pandemic and they closed school. So it was just in the nick of time. They brought their journals and all of the photographs that they had taken. And this was the activity. So they were asked to spread out all of their pictures from student teaching. And then I asked collectively, what do you see happening here? So they were very familiar with the showed method. So I didn't feel like it was necessary to go through the showed method. However, I did ask them all to just spread everything out. Can you make connections across the photos? So after the student teachers compiled their photographs, they discussed and they analyzed and they actually put the photographs into their own themes. I shared my themes and findings, which were the 6 themes that I coded in the previous slide. And together the participants and I merged our themes to come up with a deeper conclusion. So this is what they found and grouped their photos, which I'll show you in a minute. So they had a category called personal and home life. So a lot of them put pictures in there. They had positive outcomes of student teaching. They also had motivation, perspective, and the bigger picture. And then lastly, they had EdTPA and psychological distress. So again, these were the participants' groupings of the photographs. And then after they shared those groupings, then I shared with them my codes. This is a picture of the actual photo voice gallery walk. So that can give all of my audience just kind of what that looked like. You can see they're all there and they're standing up and they're moving. You know, I listened to that video, I don't know, probably 10, 15 times. I could still listen to it and find out more information and data, but it was so amazing to hear their critical dialogue that they were able to articulate now that they were out of teacher prep. It was awesome. Probably one of my best experiences. So in the next couple of slides, I'm not going to read them. I'm just going to show you what the pictures they put in here. So this is what they grouped as personal and home life. So there's a couple pictures of, you know, there's a psalm, and then there's a picture of a support group that they put in, all mixed. So these were all the participants' mixed photos. The next grouping was the positive outcomes of student teaching. So there's Maggie's badge. And then even though Pam has her piles, she says she's the prepared piler. And then there was a little booklet that the students gave Jennifer. And then motivation, perspective, and bigger picture. You know, they included, you know, the church, a dog, Maggie's ultrasound, and then the engagement photo was some in that category. And then surprise, the EdTPA life and psychological distress. They all had a picture of their EdTPA manual. Now you'll notice I had 4 participants, but there are 5 pictures of EdTPA. So Mary, the questioner, she actually took 2 pictures of her EdTPA. The one with the pumpkin cracks me up because she said, you know, I just had to take this picture of my EdTPA manual with the pumpkin because it's Halloween and this is some scary stuff. She was so funny. She was really serious about it. So I had to include that, and you know, she put this in this category. So after the student teachers all met at that gallery walk and they had their pictures, and we had this very deep discussion about all of the things that they were going through, I then moved them to another activity called the policy poster. Again, this was their time to say, all right, what can we do about it? We have all of these things that you're talking about. We have all of these photographs that are showing what's going on with your identity. What can we do about it? So I had them engage in an activity where they made a poster, and I asked them, okay, what are your suggestions for teacher educators? What are your suggestions for field supervisors? What are your suggestions for App State's College of Education? And lastly, what specifically would you change to improve student teaching / teacher preparation? And I will say there was always this underlying conversation between all of us about how I just can't wait for this research to get out there because we do want to help future student teachers. So they were very selfless, but then sometimes they, one of them said, well, I would be so mad if some teacher didn't have to do that after this, but then they're like, no, we don't want anybody to have to go through that. So they were kind of, again, in that liminal space. So this is what their policy poster looked like. And I don't expect you to be able to read that, which is why I made this handy dandy little interpretation. So this is pretty important. So the participants wanted the professors to know, take care of your students, reach out to them. So they felt like relationships weren't being built, that nobody really knew what they were dealing with. They also said, have professors be the field supervisors instead of having all of these people making these decisions. They also said for the professors to have specific individual areas of improvement. So they never really knew how they were doing on EdTPA. Oh, I see cheeky. They never knew what, they weren't allowed to get any help whatsoever on EdTPA, which I think that was really difficult for them too. And they also wrote to have relationships with the field supervisors and the cooperating teachers. So in other words, when I talked about the competing discourses earlier, it was like, okay, here's Pam. Well, she's hearing from her professor to do this. And then she's hearing from her field supervisor to do this. And then her cooperating teacher is like, we don't do any of that. So, and then you had EdTPA, which was these long rubrics. So they had all of these things swirling around plus their personal life. So that was very interesting. And then for the field supervisors, the person who actually observes should be the one who has a final say whether or not they're ready to teach. So that's kind of what they had said. That was the only thing they had said about their field supervisors. And then in general, for the College of Education, they're really asking, I mean, I get it. Everybody, will eventually have to take a difficult assessment. I mean, we ask kids to do it all the time, starting in kindergarten. But what they were saying to the College of Ed is if we're going to use EdTPA, we need more preparation. They did suggest having a course solely on how to be successful. So they did have to do EdTPA Lite. And that was something that they did in the semester before to kind of do like a little dry run. But I would like to mention that this particular cohort of distance ed students, they were the first cohort to do EdTPA to make it count in this particular university. So I think they felt a little bit more pressure. They also asked a course on how to score high, because they really wanted to just really do well and read the EdTPA manual. And they did specifically say not 40-minute sessions. That didn't do anything for them. And then lastly, for the College of Ed, to please give them experienced cooperating teachers. And then last stakeholder was just teacher preparation in general. So they actually posed a question on this policy poster. Are the people who made EdTPA mandatory teachers or retired teachers? Do they even have a background in education? I think that was essential for them because they felt like a disconnect with everyone. And then they requested to have a longer student teaching program. Perhaps the internships that they were taking that were very disconnected feed into student teaching. And then their last suggestion was to not make the experience the luck of the draw. Whereas, okay, we're just going to put you with whoever wants a cooperating teacher. So this particular policy poster, this was written by the participants. And then my study conclusion. So I realized really quickly, especially with qualitative research, it's very messy, very messy. Identity work in itself is not linear. I found it difficult to write this out. I will say shout out to Dr. Buckles, and my committee, especially Dr. Buckles, because this is her specialty, is qualitative studies. And she actually introduced me to photo voice, which I fell in love with immediately. But when she was reading my work, I was trying to make a study seem seamless. And I was coming up with all these metaphors and like, it didn't work. I was like, oh, well, it's like a quilt. She's like, just draw a picture. So I drew a picture of what I was trying to capture. And I realized that, yes, these participants, all of us, are in liminal spaces, but not just one. They're in multiple. And so after I drew this picture, I saw that they were on this, it's a continua. So I do use the term liminal space and continua synonymously. So this is what I drew, but then I, made it all fancy. So when the participant and I merged our findings, the most prominent liminal spaces, and I'll go through this picture, or the continuums, were codependency and independency, dehumanizing, humanizing, and passivity and agency. Now, agency specifically in this study, I refer to as individuals being able to make their own free choices. I just wanted to clarify that. So they would go back and forth of like, well, I really want to do this, but my professor said I can't. So all of the student teachers experience the continua at one time. And I in my study, in my dissertation, I actually write out this, it's not that long, but it's a pretty long quote from Pam, who had experienced all of the aspects of the continua in one stream of consciousness that I had to type out. So during one of the interviews in September, she went, just in one sentence, from being passive to codependent. So, she's like, well, I'm listening to what I'm told because I have to then saying, well, I'm independent because I share my opinion. And then she says that she felt dehumanized by feeling like an island and not knowing what she was doing. And then in the next sentence, she says, but I do know what I'm doing. And then her next thought was, I'm not prepared. So from that example, her identity was shuffled all around on this continua at one time. So I put EdCPA in the middle, showing that was always a driving force in the continua. So I put that in the middle with arrows going everywhere because they had all of these things going on plus EdCPA. So that really helped me with the writing piece. So I'm going to review my research questions one more time because I'm getting towards the end. So my research question was, what happens to student teachers in the liminal space, or the continuas? And how can student teachers construct and deconstruct their identities using narrative photo voice? So here's some of my findings. Relationships are key in identity construction and deconstruction. And I'm not specifically talking about just positions of power. In this particular study, it was relationships with everybody, their family, friends, everyone. Discourse between stakeholders should be the same to avoid confusion, stress, and frustration. That was part of their policy poster that they really wanted to get across. And lastly, narrative photo voice is an effective method to use with identity work, and additionally gives people a voice they would not necessarily have. So they definitely felt more power at the end when they were able to have a voice. So my future current studies, what's next for me? So I would love to employ narrative photo voice methodology in a variety of student teaching contexts, not just for me, but for any researcher that's on this call right now. you know, this methodology, it really does matter, especially in context. You know, there are so many different colleges of ed out there. This study just specifically hones in on one group of students in a distance ed cohort. And there's so many endless possibilities for this methodology. And then I'm currently doing a narrative photo voice study with a first-year teacher on her identity work with being engaged in e-learning through a pandemic. So she's got a Polaroid and a journal, and we're doing some identity work. And then I would love to be able to create a college class for teacher preparation that's focused on identity, support, and a deep understanding of using narrative photo voice. It's a very powerful method. And here are my final thoughts. We're going to wrap things up. So I want to acknowledge that everyone experiences stress in college and on a job every day. However, teachers are expected to form and sustain relationships with their students. It's an expectation in order to make them successful. The importance of relationships and getting to know people, it's essential. In the beginning of this study, I started with my story. I really just wished my personal teachers got to know me, my story, the divorce I was going through with my parents, and everything that was going on in my life. Relationship building could have changed my outlook on school and my identity. So this is a picture of Miss James, or Zaria, and I. She was in my very first class as a second grader. I was only 22 years old. I didn't realize at all the true impact I had on her life until she searched for me years ago on social media. She explained that I changed her life, and she knew she wanted to be a teacher because of me. This was us last year in the middle when I visited her first second grade class. We talk at least once a week, a little more lately because of her school is reopening and she's freaking out. I did not realize how important it is to build relationships. So only if we could teach that to our student teachers. In this study, I established real and ongoing relationships with the participants. They believe in this research more than I did, and they showed up. They still show up every time I need them to. I had to figure out all of this on my own. Relationship building, getting to know people, helping them with their identity growth, and realizing that anything that I said or did in the classroom, I had 21 or more faces looking at me all of the time. Just think of the possibilities if student teachers were taught these strategies, heard stories of success, and were led by examples from positions of power. Photo voice can also be used for any and all ages and really helps with identity growth, classroom connections, and ultimately used for policy changes and or service learning projects. This study concludes with the student teachers, Mary, Maggie, Jennifer, and Pam. They just wanted people to get to know them and understand who they were and help on who they wanted to be, specifically their college professors, field supervisors, and mentor teachers. Questions?
Yay! We can unmute and cheer, can't we?
I normally don't talk that much ever. My parents are laughing. I hear them. They're like,
that was great, Nicole.
I have a question, Nick. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know if that's okay. Bellows, I know you're facilitating, so.
That's
but yeah.
fine. Go ahead.
So throughout your research explanation, I kept on thinking if what you thought of students doing this same process in order, like at-risk students doing the same process in order to get through certain developmental strategy or obstacles, and yet you think it would work?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely do. And, you know, during my final thoughts, you know, this is a methodology that could be used for that. You know, if kids are noticing, you know, something going on, they can photograph that and write up and bring it to the policy makers. That's really what it's supposed to be used for, marginalized people.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing. It was great.
So Nicole, I have a couple of comments first, and then I want to see if folks have questions. What I really liked, and I haven't even seen you, like you didn't even do a practice run with me, I'll be honest. So this is the first time I've seen it like from beginning to end in your words. And so what I'm really loving is that this methodology is so reflexive, and that your question every time wasn't, what did you take a picture of? But it was, who are you? Every time it was, who are you? Who are you? And how is the picture reflective of that? And I think that that's one thing. I'm going to go straight to the College of Ed because that's our context, and you contextualized your study within our college as well. And so I'm thinking about how we have already reimagined our core courses that are you know, future teachers are going to take. And we worked a lot. I was on one of the courses on this reflexive nature of our teachers really examining their own selves. And so this is just to say, in the broader community of folks that are here in our college, that I think pre-service teachers could really benefit from some strong identity work. And I think that this methodology could help us with that. I'm also really excited that this work has made me think about this whole idea of what it means to be a teacher. What does it mean to become a teacher? What kinds of teachers are we trying to create here? What kinds of teachers are we putting in our student teachers' lives as models? So whether or not we say as a college, I approve of this mentor teacher, or I approve of this clinical educator, or if we say, I don't, I know you're experiencing it, but maybe you're learning what not to do, right, as a teacher. Sometimes that's our excuse, right? And I think that what your study says very clearly to me is how you talk about relationship building here at the end, how important that is. And so I'm even wondering about how can we, those of us in positions of power within the College of Ed, manipulate that experience deliberately so that we are making a clear statement about who we are putting in front of our student teachers to be models of teaching. And I wonder what that looks like now that we're virtual. You know what I mean? There are some models that I've read about co-teaching during student teaching. And if we think about co-teaching, if we were all face-to-face and, you know, in buildings with each other, we could cut the number of our cooperating teachers in half if we place 2 students in one classroom. So I wonder how we can be creative about thinking about who these cooperating teachers are, what the university's relationship is with the cooperating teacher. And I think oftentimes there isn't one. And so I'm just really impressed that your findings have pointed to some things that I think needed to be showcased in our program. And I think that your methodology allowed you to do that. One other thing, if I can find my notes. So I think also that what you've given us is one way that we can think about how we can help a student teacher develop their teaching identity. This is one way to do that. And so I think we need to be looking not just at narrative photo voice, but how else are we doing the identity work with student teachers? How are we helping them articulate who they want to become as a teacher? So I'm impressed that your study has led to these kinds of questions and wonderings and imaginings. So is there anyone else that has a comment or a question about the methodology? I didn't really pose a question to you, Nicole, but just a couple of comments that I had.
Hi, Elizabeth. Can I jump
Hey,
in real
Hannah.
quick?
I'm so glad you came. I really
Yeah,
wanted to hear Nicole's work.
This is really great. So Nicole, first of all, congratulations. And I'm Dr. Hannah Reeder. I'm the Director of Clinical Education. So I oversee student teaching. So this has been really interesting. And I would say a lot of the things that you've talked about, I wouldn't say we're super surprised by. Those are a lot of the things that we're trying to work on. But I think that your work really brings to the surface a lot of those things. So thank you for that. I have so many questions, so I'm not even sure where to start. But I think where I want to start is, did you talk at any point, and I understand the purpose of your research is to focus on the student teacher and their perspective. Did you talk at any point with their clinical educators or their supervisors or anyone from the Office of Field Experiences or professors or program directors from their content area? And would that have been beneficial or not? And it maybe wouldn't have been. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
You know what, that's a really, really great question. I did talk to all of their cooperating teachers. And I felt like with this study, if I did all of that, I would be going down multiple rabbit holes because my main focus was never about EdTPA. That just sort of happened. And it was, I really just wanted to hear stories and have them document what they were experiencing in all of these different, liminal spaces. So yes, I do want to, and actually Dr. Bellows and I did talk about going to, directors and, people in the teacher prep programs and things like that. I did not do that though. I would love to hear their perspective after this study. Just to hear, I would love to talk to you more about, little specifics. I only had 30 minutes to present, but, we did get pretty deep in discussion as far as with their cooperating teachers. And they let me know how they felt. And then those feelings of, what was being projected upon their student teacher, they felt pretty upset because they're like, I don't know what EdTPA is. I don't know how to help them. They're crying. They're on anxiety medicine. So, I was kind of also, I didn't know what to say. I was just like, oh, okay, I'm just interviewing them, but they were in the room some of the times. So, but no, I mean, that's a really great question. I would love to be able to talk more with directors of teacher prep because I think some of this stuff is really good, some good suggestions. And yes, I do understand the objectivity piece that you do have to have, with EdTPA. And I think they agreed with it. They weren't like, just get rid of it. They did suggest, like, if we're going to have to do this, we really need a lot more help. So that was kind of, I have to remember that too, that assessments, especially when you're dealing with humans, you tend to be subjective. So if you had a student teacher that you really liked and one you didn't really like, it didn't matter what their work was. Usually that's what I see all the time.
And I think I remember, Nicole, specifically one of the cooperating teachers, and this, I don't think this is in the paper. I think this was in our conversations, so there was this whole idea, I think, among all of the student teachers and all of the cooperating teachers that since this was the first group that was going forward with EdTPA and sending it off to Pearson, and having cooperating teachers who did not have to go through that same thing, the cooperating teachers, I think, are in a really important position to either give the work we're doing at the university credit or to discredit it. And so I think that when they're saying, well, I didn't have to do EdTPA and I don't know why they're making you do all that, or that's not how we lesson plan, it discredits and sort of, undermines what we're trying to do at the university. Then again, we at the university aren't trying to, you know, get our students to be great at EdTPA. I mean, that is part of our job, but, you know, we don't want to teach to the test, you know, like you hear about in K-12 schools either, right? So we have a responsibility to make sure our students feel successful on that test. But at the same time, you know, how much power do we want to give the actual assessment in the work that we do at the university? So I think it's just brought up a lot of tricky things, right? That our student teachers are in a particular liminal space, right? Where they're trying to negotiate this. Is EdTPA important? Is my cooperating teacher more important? Is my field supervisor who's grading me more important? So like, who should I be listening to, right? Is sort of where they found themselves, right, Nicole? Like kind of swirling between these voices of power.
Yes, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, because one story in particular, one narrative, and I'll be brief with that, but you do make a great point. Jennifer, you know, she had made a lesson plan for one of her college courses, and she picked out a book that would go with the lesson plan. And her teacher, or the teacher of record for the student, was like, don't read that book to my kids. And she's like, but I have to, because my college professor is making, you know, not making me, but she was like, I don't know what to do. Do I do what the one who, so yeah, that like, I could feel it. That's when the whole idea of this liminal space that I started researching, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling like what I felt when I was younger. Like she like did not know what to do, because I'm going to get in trouble if I don't read this book, and then I'm going to get in trouble if I do read this book. So yeah, no, that's a great point.
Which points to identity, right? Because if they feel strong in their teacher identity, they would feel, they would have a sense of, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but they would feel good about the decision.
Agency, right? Yeah.
Of agency. They would say, well, yeah, I'm the professional, I know what to do, and this is the book that I chose.
Right. And
whereas here
we were so confused.
Because there's your panopticon, right? Everybody's watching. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a perfect example of watching somebody really in that self-regulation of, what do I do? I don't know.
Yes, and I think that's a lot of the things that we are grappling with every semester. And this, and you addressed the issue that it was the first semester when you were doing your research that EdTPA was consequential. They had to pass EdTPA to pass student teaching and to subsequently to graduate. So there's a lot of pressure on students about that. And I would say, even if you were continuing to do your research now, that would still be EdTPA. And I guess I will ask, do you go into detail in your dissertation about that it is a state mandated assessment? We have very little flexibility as a college of education when it comes to EdTPA. So just making sure that that information is there.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I think really, like, and even what we're talking about, clinical educators and finding ones who are high quality, who want to host, who practice good teaching, who know who they are as a teacher. And not all teachers are the best at hosting student teachers, and finding those. And I feel like that's something it's an ongoing process of how do we go about that, and even just getting enough clinical educators who are willing to host and all that. So I appreciate all of your input today and the feedback, and it's very interesting. And so I think it would be really cool to continue it, do it in future semesters, but then also following them into their first year of teaching would be really cool. And then having them reflect back, okay, so yeah, student teaching's hard, it's overwhelming, it's stressful, we know that. How did it prepare you for this first year of teaching now that you're here and you're looking back? Because sometimes hindsight is 20/20, and when you're, instead of when you're going through it. But yeah, I think that could be really interesting what we would see. I would really love to see that. So.
Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. And to honor your question, yes, I do talk about how it is state mandated. And I also do address that I was not anticipating to have EdTPA in the middle of my continuas. Like that was not what I was searching for. So thank you for that. And these 4 women actually did commit. They said, I will, they still ask me for film. They're still documenting their e-learning. You know, they did commit to 5 years because in my problem statement, it's beginning teachers usually quit between the first 5 years. And I'm trying to prevent that, because they, you know, they're really good and they're in it for the right reasons. And we want to keep that. So thank you. I really appreciate your questions and your feedback.
I'm thinking too, Nicole, about how they, in the midst of it, they're saying, I wouldn't wish this on any, I feel so sorry for student teachers coming next semester. But then toward the end, because they got through it, their attitude was kind of like, well, I had to do it. So
It was.
Those other student teachers better, you know, so it's this whole, I like how you use the term rite of passage. And really, when I think about teacher education, the only other profession that I think it sort of resembles is, you know, becoming a doctor, where you have to go through a residency, you know, training. And I wonder how we could extend that. I know that a lot of times our excuse at App is geography, right? That we can't really have everybody close by, or there aren't enough placements, which is true. But during that student teaching semester, I think we can definitely get creative about how to maintain relationships with our partner schools during student teaching, and also with those mentor teachers. I just think it needs to be more of a, I think there needs to be more irons in the fire during that, and folks communicating with one another during that process.
I will say, Elizabeth, that's something that has been a huge goal of mine, really over the last year or so. So we're taking baby steps, but it is quite a process, and it's finding that balance between increasing communication, building relationships, but sometimes teachers see that as more work, and so trying to navigate that and listen to them. But yes, those relationships are critical.
It's making me think too, Nicole, and I know this wasn't just realistic given the timing, but that the gallery walk in February, which was attended by your participants, really in Photo Voice, the idea would be ultimately that they'd have a gallery walk with other stakeholders. And so that conversation, so Photo Voice does set up the possibility. So I can imagine if faculty had gone to the gallery walk alongside cooperating teachers, kind of sort of everybody that is invested in this, all the work that you're talking about, the discourses, that Photo Voice does offer an opportunity to bring people together to have conversation across these discourses or across these different identities. So that is sort of thinking of like what's next. Just thinking about your methodology, it does offer opportunities for that to happen. Although as part of this particular project those cross conversations did not happen. So I don't know if you could speak to that in terms of sort of the way you structured the gallery walk, and how moving forward you might think about that gallery walk as an opportunity to actually talk with stakeholders.
So, wow, Dr. Bellows and I were just talking about that last night. So, wow, I was ready for that question. So they did, so in in my research timeline, we do have a spot where they were going to do that in the College of Ed and have their pictures. They were ready to do that. They didn't want their identities hidden. They wanted to have these conversations. They wanted to bring, you know, the policy poster. And I think that they still probably do. I think we just ran out of time. And, you know, the one had her baby in March. So I think it was a week after that final gallery walk. So life just happened, but they actually knew when I did the 8-step training that this is what we would do with it at the end. That you would take all of your photographs, you would take all of your stories, and you would address all of these people that you want to make a change. So they knew that. It wasn't a surprise. I just think, you know, like you said, in this particular study, things just went a little bit crazy there at the end with, you know, the pandemic and e-learning. But I know that if they had the opportunity to have a gallery walk with all of the stakeholders, they would do it. So great question. But yeah, they definitely knew that was the final endpoint.
And I wonder if we broadened it. I mean, imagine if we had an assignment, you know, a common assignment in one of our core courses, and that was sort of, you know, at the end, if it was photo voice, you know, we would have this college-wide gallery walk for folks to come and see how we're becoming teachers.
Yeah, and then, you know, for this particular study, you know, I had mentioned the use of Polaroid cameras, and that's not realistic for everybody because not everybody has them. The film's expensive, but there are a couple of really good photo voice studies that do talk about using cell phones, and then that's okay. You just would have to address, you know, some of those limitations because everybody has a cell phone. Everybody could snap a picture. But my whole point was with the theory that I used, it's like, okay, well, what if they took a picture and they're like, no, I want to position it. You know, I wanted them to, you know, kind of like the lomography, like you just snap and that's it. That's how you're feeling at that moment. But it could definitely be used with cell phones. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Because you know, Beth, you had us do ours, you know, with cell phones and we just printed our pictures off in class. But you do have to manipulate them. That's important. So they do have to be printed. But no, great question.
Nicole, I want to ask you about something. From the participant's point of view, what does it mean to be a real teacher? And then I've got a couple follow-up questions, but I want you to start there.
I'm really glad you asked that. So in all of them, not just one, all four, their idea of being a real teacher was, this is crazy, was having that official badge and being in charge of their own classroom. Being the one that can make all of the decisions and that they weren't going by a classroom management system that wasn't theirs because they, you know, they felt like they were just kind of a teacher assistant. So they felt like they weren't actually like in charge. So in other words, they wanted to be a position of power for their students. And that badge was very significant to them, having that badge.
It's fascinating because that comes across clearly in the dissertation, but it made me wonder if there's almost a paradox there in the sense that, you know, they see the being in charge as being a real teacher when in many ways, even real teachers are in the panopticon, right? That real teachers are also under constant surveillance. It's the technology just shifts a little bit, right? It goes from EdTPA to EVOS.
Sure, yes.
And so that, but in that sense, the liminal space, they never get out. So I just wanted, you know, it's kind of paradoxical. I just wanted to offer that and see what you thought about that.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I'm not sure what chapter I addressed that in. I do talk about EVOS a little bit, you know, because once you are a real teacher, you know, your data is tracked. And, you know, when you go into a job interview and you're a red teacher, you're not, you know, and really people positions of power don't really care what population of students that you had or the circumstances. Like if you're a red teacher, you're probably not going to get hired. But yes, it is interesting. It was interesting to see how even, I mean, we all are, we're all in these liminal spaces. And you strive towards independency, but depending on the different masks you wear, like I'm super independent in the classroom, but then you throw me into something else, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So it's just kind of learning how to deal with those situations that I think is important. But you're absolutely right. It is a skewed look at what a real teacher is, or also what a good teacher or a bad teacher is. That was something also that came up several times. So, and you know, that my point is that all of those things are constructed by people. It's just what it is.
And Nicole, I wanted to ask you too, from where you stand now, how is this dissertation process kind of mirrored what you were studying in terms of a liminal space, a deconstruction, a reconstruction of identity for you? Have you gone through in parallel what you kind of witnessed your student teachers going through?
Yes. So I actually also took I did a narrative photo voice along with them. Just because when I've been teaching so long, I love to model, you know, just not what I'm writing, but just kind of, you know, I'm alongside of them. And, you know, just to be super transparent, you know, I went through a really, really horrible divorce during this process of somebody who was not supportive of me or my work. And I lost my identity during my identity work. And if it wasn't for the 3 amazing, strong women on my committee saying, you need to stop for a minute, you need to take a deep breath, and you need to realize your study, your identity is being lost in someone else. So yeah, thank you for asking, because yes, I was very much doing this as well, and in many liminal spaces. You know, it was a terrible situation with my divorce. I have a young child. You know, I work full time. I had like 3 jobs at one point last year. So yeah, my identity was definitely compromised many times. And I had to remember like the important work that I'm doing for the participants and for hopefully future educators. So yeah, thank you for asking me. Yeah. I see Dr. Bellows smiling because she knows all the things. Lots of identity work.
I might have been the one that reminded you that you were doing identity work.
You sure did. You did. Yes.
Well, I see our time. We still have some time for some comments or questions. I think facial, the next step is to ditch everybody for a minute.
Yeah, if you know, we can take a few more minutes if there are any other comments or questions. Otherwise, right, we'll go in, the committee will convene after that.
I did want to say something to your comment, Vaishal, about I also recognized the paradox, right, that you're never really out of it. You just sort of shift where you are in the panopticon, really. But I remember that feeling. I think all of us who have been teachers remember that feeling. There's just a feeling where you're like, I'm it. I'm in control. This is my show now. And so I wonder what that means for identity work, and if we're truly adopting and living and breathing a constructivist theory, right, in practice. What does that look like? That's what gets us that feeling, is power. And so I think we really need to question that and think about what that means for our youngest learners, how we're positioning public education and what it means to teach and learn. Because it sounds to me like we still have this idea we cannot let go of, that the teacher is the person in the room who's in charge, rather than co-constructor of learning. And so I think that Nicole's study really helps to challenge that idea, and for us to really think about it as educators of future teachers, how we want our students to think about their roles of power over children.
Yeah. And then you throw in the whole e-learning now, And the teacher that I'm studying right now, she's a first year teacher. And I was talking to her a little bit about my research, and she goes, "The panopticon? I know what a panopticon is. I feel like I'm living in that." And I'm like, well, all right, let's go ahead and get you a camera. Because she knew exactly what I was talking about. And she said, "I feel like I am being watched more than ever because anybody can come into my class. Parents can videotape her teaching, and you're in people's homes." And so I'm looking forward to that study. I think that's going to be fascinating to see how it is to teach in a pandemic and completely online when your student teaching training definitely wasn't that. So that adds a whole layer of the panoptic surveillance.
Nicole, as you say that and think about where this goes, I really hear your identity has become that of a scholar practitioner. And that's what we're here for. And that's what we're honoring. So, you know, you're really thinking like someone who has agency in shaping the future of teacher education and education, and thinking about the deeper questions of what we're doing here. So thank you for all the questions you've brought to this work.
Thank you for saying that.
I'm making notes for you, Nicole.
Okay.
That's good.
Jen, do you have any questions, or other folks, any last questions in the last couple minutes here?
I don't. I sent Nicole my comments last night in her document, but I mean, I thought her presentation was brilliant. I thought the images, I'm sitting here thinking about having an image of the panopticon in there somewhere, because I thought that image was so powerful. Yeah. But I think it's really just come a long way, and I'm super proud of her.
Thank you. Thank you for being there for me. All of you.
I'm curious what your family thinks about your studying.
Really? Are you curious about that?
I think it's amazing work, Nick.
Thank you.
So proud of you.
I see Marlene. My
Yeah,
mom.
I'm really proud of you, Nick. I'm crying.
Oh, no, don't cry. You guys.
Because you're so passionate about teaching since you were young.
Mm-hmm.
So you found your true passion, and then you do do it the best. You can. Sorry, I can't look.
No, it's okay. But also we learned that when we play board games, it's all about relationships as well, and positions of power, because they go against me. We got to build more relationships, and that being
Yeah.
So I just had to lighten up the mood, because I don't like when my mom cries.
But who won last night?
You did.
This is great. I'm glad you have such a strong support system, Nicole. I know the process for you was less than ideal, but I think a lot of times when you engage in work this personally challenging, it, like Vashel says, I'm so glad he asked about your identity, because you have emerged as a researcher. This is your first big project. That's really what the dissertation is. And so I think it's such a cool project to sort of springboard whatever it is that you're going to do with this down the line. And I'm just happy I was a part of it. I was interested in your study from the minute you mentioned it. And so I'm glad we stuck with it, and that you stuck with it. Are they busting in on you?
They sure are. My mom is literally crawling on the ground, so she's not. You guys, I apologize, but you know what? This is what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys, get out of. I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say I'm just really proud that you stuck with it, and that when I told you to stop and rethink, you stopped and rethought. And you know, I tried my best to guide you, but you know, you had to do it. You had to pull the weight, and I'm just really proud that you stuck with it. So.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't have done it without my committee and Dr. Miller just believing in me. I mean, and I think, again, if we're going to bring up identity, you know, I think part of being so insecure and worried, you know, that started when I was young, because I was always told I couldn't, and I couldn't, and I couldn't, and I couldn't. So even though I'm doing it, I still feel like, what is that, imposter syndrome that I looked up. And, you know, like, I just wish, again, you know, my dissertation is complete transparency. I let my whole self out there, and I'm okay with it if it helps other people. But I wish that I could be able to just really enjoy it, you know, and just be like, you know, like, yeah, I did this. But because you know, I was shaped so young, I do deal with that still, and I'm still working on my identity. But just to have such a strong committee that believes in you, and a family that believes in you, it's overwhelming. And my cohort members that have shown up today, I mean, it just means everything to me. And my principal's here, you know, even though he's dealing with work stuff, like he made it, he showed up. So thank you, all of you.
I think when the teachers get their badge, I think once you can hold the dissertation in your hands and you see it, that's a good feeling. So that's coming. I know the defense is sort of anticlimactic, really, you know, but it's great that everybody could come today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, all of you.
I just wanted to say I'm Nicole's aunt by proxy. And I really feel that this research has only just begun. And I think that it spans across not only students that are learning to be educators, but also students that are high school students even, and young people. And that Panopticon just goes, it's all through education. And we really need to understand what it means to be institutionalized. And so when, you know, you compare school with incarceration, a lot of people feel that I dealt with in my years of education feel comfortable being incarcerated because they had been institutionalized their whole life anyway. And it's structure, and that's the structure that they become used to. So I would love to see Nicole's research span through the entire institutionalization of education and that Panopticon, and perhaps, you know, down the line compare it to incarceration, and how it's, for some, it's inevitable that they end up incarcerated because they're used to being institutionalized. So just want to say thank you so much. This is wonderful. And I can really see this research taking off in so many different directions.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Nicole and I have talked a lot about similarities between education and incarceration. And we see it sometimes in our youngest learners. We see kindergartners walking down the hall with their hands behind their back, and they're asked to put a bubble in their mouth so that they don't talk. They just
bubbles and tails. Yeah.
So, you know, there, I think, are a lot of problematic practices that that research like this can expose, but to go beyond that, I love your question in the showed method that says, why does this condition exist? And so I think that's really where narrative photo voice and the way that you did the showed method became really revealing to all of us. Why does this condition exist? It allows your participants to really deconstruct what's happening and what's going on.
Okay, Elizabeth, it's if what we could do is the committee and I, we can go. Can you go to a breakout room? Nicole, you can hang out here with your family, friends, colleagues,
Okay.
and we'll talk for a few minutes and we'll be back.
Okay, is it cool if I move to the living room with my family when you guys come back?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're okay with it too, Nick.
Oh, great.
You'll get more hugs there.
Yes. Cool. Thank you.
Nick, you want to stop sharing your screen?
I sure can.
There you go. There we are.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just going to stop my video and I'm going to go into the living room.
Okay.
Oh, Elizabeth, can you stop the record?
Should we jump off or we can
Nope,
stay?
you're fine.
Okay.
I'm right here. So we paused the recording, Nicole, while we went to our small group. And so just to let you know that I started it back up. And I would just like to congratulate Dr. Welz on her successful defense of her dissertation today.
Thank you.
And so, whew, take a breath.
Yeah, I need more than one.
So we talked through some changes that we want to see, and you and I talked a little bit about that last night too. And so you and I, Nicole, some other time, not today, we'll sit down together and just hash through those before you send this off to the graduate school. This will be your final push. So like I said, it's hugs and celebrations, but we're still gonna do a couple of things to the paper before we officially send it off and sign off on it. But everybody agrees your presentation today was stellar. You know this work, you can talk about it and answer questions about it. And I know that you're gonna carry forward this research in the work that you do. And I'm excited to have you as a teacher educator colleague of the future. I know that's what you want to do with this degree. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And it was a journey and oftentimes a struggle, but here we are at the final push. So we're just really proud of you and congratulations again, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Can you hear that? Sure. Yeah, thank you all so much. I can't thank the committee and Dr. Miller enough, and my family, the ones that hung around. Thank you. I think I'm gonna probably sleep the best I've ever slept in a very long time.
Go sleep and call me when you wake up and we'll make some evidence.
Yeah, so we'll talk Wednesday maybe.
Sounds great.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you.
Congratulations, Nick.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, family.
Signing off. Oh, somebody did a clap hand. Oh, thank you so much. And Jen, thanks for
Nicole.
Thank you, Aunt Karen.
Oh, you were wonderful.
Thank you so much. All right, I love all of you.
Love you too, Nick.
Love you.
Congratulations.
Bye, thank you.
There's a
Thank
doctor
you.
in the house.
See ya.
Bye.